Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of Kerbal Arc. And I'm glad to have made it 10 episodes deep with this series, as I don't know that I've made it that deep with a creative project like this before. Last episode, we left off in a bit of a pickle regarding what science and part options we had available for a Mun landing. And today we're going to pull out all the stops and shoot for the moon, or rather the Mun. Now, we do have one avenue for science available to us before we start planning a Mun landing. This is to collect some scan data using our shiny new high-resolution altimetry scanner, the SAR-X antenna, which we can also accept some contracts for. We're again making use of more of our new parts, and I made sure to pack some beefy batteries on this bad boy to keep the scanner running, since it uses quite a bit of juice. The first of these satellites will be put up around Kerbin, which should be a good test run for the rocket we've built. We're launching here into a polar orbit directly with an apoapsis of 375 kilometers, which is the optimal altitude at which to operate this scanner. After circularization, this satellite has almost 1900 meters per second of delta V remaining, so it should work just fine for Minmus and the Mun. The second satellite will be going out to Minmus, so I went into the tracking station and warped until a good launch window before going ahead and launching into an orbit with a roughly 6-degree inclination. Once we're in orbit, we can go ahead and plan a 1522 meter per second maneuver that will bring us in over Minmus's south pole. The burn ended up being a bit inaccurate, but nothing that a small correction maneuver can't fix. Once that's finished, I adjusted the flight planning one more time, and I'm going to actually head back to the Space Center so that we can get this Mun satellite going while waiting for the transfer. This satellite was launched into an equatorial orbit to transfer to the Mun, and we have a similar plan here, which is to come in over one of the Moon's poles. After completing the transfer burn and a correction burn, we head back into the tracking station to wait for the satellites to reach their respective targets. The Minmus satellite reaches its much closer target first, and we capture close to the Moon's surface with an apoapsis at 375 kilometers before warping up and circularizing the orbit at this higher altitude. We head back into the tracking station and do the same exact thing with the Mun satellite. Now that all of the satellites have been positioned, we can head back into the KSC and time warp until the data has been returned and our contracts completed. It was at this point that I realized I was well and truly at an impasse if I refused to go for a Mun landing. I had a look in mission control for some new contracts, but the only thing of significance I found was to transmit science from space around Kerbin, which should be easy to complete along the way. We did, however, have enough science to unlock miniaturization, which grants us access to the tiny docking ports, and the EVA science experiment, both of which could enhance our ability to generate science from such a mission. In the VAB, I set to work building the largest rocket we've constructed in this series so far, with just under 10,000 meters per second of delta V. As an aside, I'll probably start referring to the part sizes using actual words for ease of understanding, and they'll correspond to the sizes I put up on screen. The bottom stage uses a quite peculiar configuration of the medium or 2.5 meter skipper engine, with 4 of the radially mounted thud engines, born out of desperation to heave this behemoth into the air without the help of more advanced engines like the mainsail. This stage is aided by a pair of kickback solid rocket boosters, which get the craft's thrust to weight ratio on the pad up to an astounding 1.4. After these stages are both expended, there's an intermediate diameter kicker stage with the twin nozzle Bobcat engine to get the craft up to orbit. From here, the transfer stage with a Terrier engine can get us to the Mun and some of the way through our descent to its surface. The final stage has enough delta V to complete the landing, launch back into lunar orbit, and return home, including a retro burn to slow down just before re-entry. We roll out to the launch pad just before dawn and set this 130-ton monster alight. After discarding the spent SRBs, launch stage, and kicker stage, the craft is down to 11 tons, less than a tenth of its launch mass. Up in space around Kerbin, we can circularize our orbit and plan our transfer maneuver. While waiting for the craft to come around for the burn, Jeb hops out to perform our very advanced new EVA experiment for the first time, looking on in wonder as this nut reverses back and forth, spinning on its axis. Once Jebediah is done being mesmerized, we can conduct our transfer to the Mun, as well as a series of small correction burns to get the trajectory where we want it. Along the way, Jeb hops out from time to time to watch this nut of his spin about in various different situations without any improvement to his creativity. After capturing in low orbit around the Mun, we need to decide where we'd like to land. Near the vessel's periapsis, there's a mountain which appears to be at least one of, if not the highest point on the Mun, and I decided it would be a really smart and giga-brained idea to do a precision landing there for some reason. I spent some time here looking very closely at the high-resolution altitude map we recently scanned, as well as the high-resolution slope map generated with that data, and tried to line up the craft's path with the best site I could find at the top of the mountain. After some meticulous planning, I used the small amount of fuel remaining in the transfer stage to deorbit the vessel before running into one small problem. While the small engine on the vessel is fine for general purpose Mun landing and saves on weight, the thrust is not at all enough to slow down and land at our target from this close. Believe me, I tried several times. The unfortunate but acceptable consequence is that we have to use a bit of fuel to get back into a stable orbit and head around for the next pass. I was concerned that this would ruin the nice trajectory I had set up, but in actuality it takes only an hour for the vessel to orbit around in comparison to the 302 hours it takes the Mun to rotate, so the difference won't be horrendous. This time I approached much more cautiously, slowing down horizontally while occasionally compensating with some vertical burning. I kept an eye on the vessel's maximum acceleration in the vessel info panel, as well as the ETA to our waypoint, to make sure I was giving myself enough time to slow down. In the terminal phase of the descent, I had to boost myself up vertically to have enough clearance to actually approach the mountain. When I was about to touch down, I realized the place I was about to set down had much too severe of a slope, so I looked around for a flatter area. In the spot I finally set down, the craft could keep itself up, but it wasn't steady, so I had a go at moving around until I finally found a spot where the craft was more stable after tweaking the landing gear around. Now that it was finally safe, I enabled the experiments and Jebediah took his first steps out onto the lunar surface. I didn't quite land at the peak, so Jeb decided to use his RCS pack to jet on up to the summit to claim it for all Kerbal kind. While up here enjoying the view, he decided he needed to perform a very important science experiment. With these two critically important tasks completed, and with the EVA report and surface sample ready, Jeb headed back to the lander to transmit his data and wait for the remaining experiments to finish. After the material study is finished, our business today on the Mun is finished, and it's time for Jebediah to say goodbye for the time being. We're lifting off here from a location such that we can conduct a maneuver to eject from the Mun right at the peak of our trajectory without any waiting. After expending what was left of the spacecraft's fuel to slow down, the capsule was separated from the bus for a bumpy ride back down to Kerbin. This was another extremely dangerous re-entry, but luckily this time the pod wasn't up to its critical temperature. After landing, Jeb has one final duty to attend to before the capsule is recovered. After recovering the capsule, we've earned 255.1 science points with this mission, a frankly monumental amount by our standards so far. After perusing the tech tree for a while, I decided on 3 90 science techs to buy. Space exploration unlocks a resource scansat, a space telescope, the hitchhiker container, and most importantly, the deployed science experiment control station and the cargo storage containers. Advanced flight control unlocks an intermediate-sized 2-person capsule, the largest Sputnik capsule, RCS systems, and the MechJeb maneuver execution tool. Landing unlocks intermediate and medium heat shields, larger landing legs which will help avoid spacecraft tipping over, and retractable landing gear for planes with real suspension. These 3 techs unlock a huge number of parts that should help us get past some of our current impasses and set the stage for us to start using surface-deployed science experiments for the first time. Stick around to see who might be sent out for our advanced long-term science in the next episode.